Welcome back. Welcome back. This is the People's Voice. I am Trey Evans, and I am the People's Voice. Thank you again for checking out the podcast this week. As always, it is greatly appreciated. As always, we thank everyone who has taken some time to listen to the podcast today. We do understand that you could be utilizing that time to do something else, so we do appreciate you spending your time equity with us. As always, if this information is valuable, you feel it to be enlightening and worth sharing, we do ask that you subscribe to the podcast and turn on notifications. That way, you'll be notified when each episode is released. And we do put out a new episode each and every Friday, which is heard on all podcast platforms. And then we also put a video on YouTube as well for those of you who would like to watch the podcast. But as always, we say thank you and welcome to the People's Voice podcast. So today I want to get into the topic of social media. And specifically, I want to talk about legislation that was recently passed that was passed to, I guess, in some way try to curb the addictive nature of social media, specifically when it comes to younger individuals, teenagers here in the United States, and of course around the world. But I'm focusing here on the United States today because a bill was recently passed in New York State to basically ban, if you will, the addictive nature of social media when it comes to children, specifically, again, teenagers, on social media. And that bill that was recently passed by New York legislation, and it's actually going on its way to be signed by the governor of New York, Governor Kathy Hochul. That bill is called the SAFE Act, and it's an acronym. It stands for Stop Addictive Feeds Exploitation. I wanted to talk about this today because obviously social media is a huge influence on everyone's life. Whether you're utilizing or on social media just to, for informational purposes, like someone such as myself, or if you're using it or utilizing it for entertainment purposes, or however you utilize it for business. There's multiple facets. It is obviously a huge part of our world, and specifically, it is a huge part of young people's world, specifically when it comes to not just them being on it for entertainment purposes, but it literally encompasses their whole lives and has a lot of various effects on their life. So today, that's what I want to talk about. I want to talk about legislation that's being passed to curb the addictive feeds, as they call them, the addictive feeds of social media. So to kind of start that, let me go back to the bill that was recently passed in New York. So this bill, the SAFE Act, again, it stands for Stop Addictive Feeds Exploitation. The purpose of the bill is to prohibit social media companies from sending addictive social media feeds to children. And, we've all heard about the algorithm and how that works, things of that nature. But this bill specifically, what it does is it prevents, and I'm actually reading directly from the Governor.New York site where they kind of laid this out. But it says the SAFE Act will require social media companies to restrict addictive feeds on their platforms for users under 18, unless parent consent is granted. Users under 18 will not receive addictive feeds, and users may still be able to search for their specific topics of interest. And I wanted to stop right there because I know maybe just as I had questions, you might have some questions too, like what is an addictive feed, right? Because I said, well, that's kind of general, kind of vague. What is an addictive feed? Well, in that bill, they went on to describe what addictive feeds are. And I'm reading here from the New York Senate .gov site where where the bill is actually listed. And for those of you who want to research this, this is Bill S7694A. But in that bill, they identified or defined what addictive feeds are. And it says here in the bill, it says addictive feeds are relatively new technology used, principally by social media companies. But it says addictive feeds show users personalized feeds of media that keep them engaged in viewing longer. They started being used on social media platforms in 2011. It kind of goes on to explain that. But it says here that the addictive feeds have proliferated companies and have addictive feeds have been developed, through so sophisticated machine learning algorithms that automatically process data about the behavior of users, including not just what they formerly like, but tens of hundreds of thousands of data points, such as how long a user has spent looking at a particular post. It then takes that, and I don't want to get too technical. I'm already getting too technical, but basically it builds that algorithm to keep these teenagers and all users really on their platforms for the purpose of providing content for money, for obviously monetary purposes. It goes on to say addictive feeds have increasingly devastating effects on children and teenagers as well. So, one might say, well, why would they want to limit this? What is the purpose of it, or what is the reason behind it? Well, it has been shown through several studies, obviously, and many people have heard the effects that social media has specifically on young people, adults too, but specifically on young people. In the bill, it says that the addictive feeds and social media have been tied to significantly higher rates of youth depression, anxiety, suicidal ideation, and self-harm. It goes on to say children are particularly susceptible to addictive feeds, which provide a nonstop drip of dopamine with each new piece of media. And now, why is this being done, right? Okay, okay, so there are addictive feeds and these kids are watching them. Well, what's the purpose of them? Well, as you know, I always say everything has a price and everything is about money here in the United States, right? So I'm reading a study here from the Harvard Gazette, and they kind of broke down in terms of the money that is being made for users under 18 from social media. Here in the article from the Harvard Gazette, it says that in a recent study, they estimate that social media platforms and the big six social media platforms are collectively made almost $11 billion in 2022 from advertising revenue. And this is just from users under the age of 18. So the purpose behind the addictive feeds obviously is money behind it. Now, of course, with this, there's always somebody on the other side arguing against this, right? So there is an advocacy group by the name of Net Choice, and Net Choice is a advocacy group for these organizations, Meta and X and all of these Snapchat and all of these other large social media platforms. And they argue that these bills, and New York is just passed a bill, but California also passed a bill as well. And I'll kind of go back to that in a second. But they argue that these bills ultimately are suppressing free enterprise, free expression, and most importantly, they're saying that this is a suppression of freedom of speech, because in their arguments, they believe that social media, in terms of the legislation of social media, should be done by parents and not by government. So basically, this is the argument that big government is intervening where, and big government is intervening where individuals should have the rights. That's another argument for another day, because and I'll interject my personal opinion. I think that, the addictive nature of social media is a real one, specifically when you start talking about younger users, especially those under 18. There has to be some form of regulation beyond just parental guidance, because as anyone who has a child knows, once you hand that phone to the child, as many programs and software and apps that you can put on the phone to prevent access, it is very, very difficult to monitor that, especially when you are not connected to that phone on a regular basis. But to kind of go back, so that's kind of some of the pushback, in terms of this bill. As I mentioned, California also has a similar bill that they passed, and so on their way to be signed. This is Bill SB 976, and their bill is Protecting Our Kids from Social Media Addiction Act. And what their bill does is similar to the New York bill, the SAFE Act, in that it wants to regulate addictive feeds. Now, how is this going to be done, and what's going to be regulated? Well, in terms of the regulations, they're it's like multi-pronged. So in the New York bill, the addictive feeds can't be pushed to these users. In addition, in the New York bill, they also want to have notifications disabled during certain times of the day. So in the New York bill, what they're proposing, or what was proposed, is that social media platforms cannot send minors notifications between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. because, again, this is part of the addictive part of the social media experience, is that even when these kids are not on the platform, they get these notifications, which then causes them to jump on to look at potential content that can lead to some of the things that I outlined here. Matter of fact, New York Senator Andrew Granadis, New York State Senator, who is supporting this bill, he spoke about the addictive nature of social media. So let me just play that real quick, and then I'll continue from there. So
these algorithms are designed to be addictive, and basically end up showing kids content that they do not sign up to see in the first place.
New York Governor Kathy Hochul and mental health experts say some of these social media apps are contributing to a youth mental health crisis, by keeping kids scrolling through harmful content.
And so, and again, that was from Fox 5 in New York. But as I was making that point, the addictive nature has a lot to do with these notifications, because when these kids are sleeping or attempting to sleep, they're getting tons of notifications that basically are triggering them almost like a drug to get back on the platform to check to see, what content they think they need to see based on the algorithm. But going back to, so the second prong of that New York bill is that notifications have to be disabled between 12 a.m. and 6 a.m. for any user under the age of 18. In the California bill, and the California bill was passed by their Senate, and this was on a 35-2 vote. It was bipartisan. In their bill, it goes even a step further in terms of notifications. It says that under California's, and I'm reading from Nancy Skinner, representative of the Senate District 9 in California, it says that under California's Protecting Our Kids from Social Media Addiction Act, online platforms and apps would be barred from sending minors any addictive feeds without the consent of a parent or guardian. In addition, social media companies would be prohibited from sending notifications from midnight to 6 a.m. and on school days from 8 a.m. to 3 p.m. without parental consent. So the California bill takes even a step further to try to eliminate addictive feeds, or at least restrict addictive feeds and notifications from children under the age of 18. Now, how many kids would this affect? Well, going back to that article that I was reading from the Harvard Gazette, they estimate that, you're talking about almost well over, 100 million individual users. They said that a study found that in 2022, YouTube had over 49 million users, US-based users under the age of 18. TikTok had 18 million. Snapchat had 18 million. Instagram, 16 million. Facebook, 9 million. And Twitter, or X, had well over 7 million users, U.S.-based users under the
Men
age
lie, women lie. The numbers don't.
under the age of 18. So this would literally affect well over 100 million children if, obviously, it was passed nationwide. But again, this is the first two bills that have been passed. To close out, what are some of the penalties? In the New York bill, what they state is that if companies are found that they have violated this law, and this law, again, in both California and in New York, are going up to the governors for final approval. But in New York, it says that the legislation, for any addictive feeds that are sent once this bill goes into law to users under the age of 18 without parental consent, which would literally require the individual parent to go into the app and select consent. But for those of us who have set up social media profiles, that there's really no safeguard in place that a kid can't go in there and say that he or she is 21. But in terms of the penalties, it says that the legislation will authorize the Office of the Attorney General to bring action to enjoin violations of the new law, as well as seek civil penalties of up to $5,000 per violation and any other remedies. So basically, the bill in New York, and I think also the bill in California, pretty much said the same thing, is that, for each user under 18 who still receives these notifications and also receives this these addictive feeds, the social media platforms themselves can be fined up to $5,000 per user. So, I mean, listen, for me, the jury is still out. Again, listen.
All I'm doing is presenting the facts.
And so I'm not saying that this is going to be effective, but it's a step, in my personal opinion, in the right direction because, listen, social media is addictive for all individuals. But the effects that it has on those under the age of 18 is literally life-changing and literally is affecting the mental health of young people. And as you hear more and more about, the mental health crisis, social media is playing a big role in it. So I think that this is a great step in the right direction, and hopefully more states will join in and begin to really look at the effects that this is creating on younger individuals and enact legislation as well. But that's what I wanted to cover today. I wanted to talk about this. I saw this pop up in the news feed, so I thought it would be a good topic to kind of introduce or at least review for those of you who know about it, but definitely spread the word. Maybe we'll get some more states on board and get this thing moving forward to at least right size some of these algorithms and active feeds that are being sent to these children. But as always, if you'd like to leave a comment, you can leave a comment and reach me on any social media platform. I'm at the People's Voice Podcast on Instagram. And you can also reach me at I am Trey Evans on all social media platforms. But as always, we appreciate you tuning in today. Dreams are not just for sleeping. Please wake up and live your dreams. My name is Trey Evans, the People's Voice. Tell somebody about the truth. Salute.